Happy Tuesday, Run Tried by community. Welcome to our Fireside chat on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, which is now on its 144th episode. It's amazing to think that what started as a let's give it a try has become the flagship show of a network that has 9 total shows on it now. I am amazed every day we talk about this. Today, we're going to be joined by Jena Brown, who is a registered dietitian that works with endurance athletes and is an endurance athlete herself. She will be running the Houston Marathon in 5 days, not a few weeks like my note says. And we're going to be chatting about that amongst other things. But before we bring Jena on, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network where you get your podcasts. We have 9 shows, which means there is something for everyone, and we really mean that. Q&A shows like Beyond the Finish Line and Running Tales, as well as our newest show, Melanin MVP with Angela Hollowell, to humorous shows about food and music. If you have an interest, we have a show. Check us out. Let's bring Jena onto the show and talk to her about her training for the Houston Marathon, as well as getting some nutrition and hydration tips as we make our way through the winter and into the spring races. Hey, Jena, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am fantastic. I had to quickly pivot on my intro because I thought Houston was in a couple of weeks. I've always envisioned it as being a February race, but you informed us in the green room that it is actually in 5 days on January 19th.
That is correct. And it's funny, I was not nervous until you said, I wasn't nervous about being on the show. And then when you said the race is in 5 days, my heart started pounding.
We're here for making people uncomfortable, that's for sure.
So,
if we have a talent, it's that.
Oh my gosh. Do we all have the fear of failure, or is it just me?
No, I think we all fear failure, but this is a great topic to discuss, even though it's not nutrition and hydration. And I want to bring you in on this because you've been in New Zealand for a few days and are just getting back. So I've been talking with Brett Harrison on LinkedIn, who, Jen, I think you've connected to as well there. And we were talking about fear of failure, and we started talking about comfort zone. And the reality is we don't believe, Brett and I don't believe that it's not about fearing the failure. It's about getting out of our comfort zone. And so for you, I'd ask you, you've been training for a number of weeks, months leading up to the Houston Marathon. What's the comfort zone for you? And what's the fear of leaving that comfort zone to accomplish your goals that you're facing?
Yeah. So actually, when I said that, when the words came out of my mouth, fear of failure, I actually don't believe in that philosophy. I don't believe you go into a race and you pass or fail. But that's just kind of what rolled out. Because the takeaway, one, you at minimum learn something, right? Every race you learn something new about yourself, about the sport. Never is there a failure. I just kind of said that. And I think for me, honestly, and I don't know about for you, just kind of being out in that public space a little bit. I don't believe anybody's gonna be watching me, okay? But people may ask me how I did, and what if it didn't go like I hope. And so I think that's kind of where my hesitation comes, just in all honesty. But I thrive, and I think growth comes from when you're out of your comfort zone. 100%. So I very much thrive in that, and I encourage my kids the mindset of, you grow when you're uncomfortable, and then I also say within, as long as you're safe. So we wouldn't want to do something unsafe and say, oh, it's okay, it's just growth. But yeah, I love that environment.
Oh, and we were talking prior to Jena joining us in the green room almost exactly about this. So I want to ask you as well, what's the comfort zone you want to get out of when it comes to endurance sports this year? Not business or anything else, but endurance sports specifically. What do you want to get through?
That's
Me?
good.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, you're all good. I was just gonna add that I appreciate Jenna's take on failure being growth, because Jason and I both agree with that. We believe that failure is growth, and it's not the end. It's not terminal. It's just the building block to success. If I were to talk about just specifically in the realm of endurance sports, I think for me, my comfort zone was really becoming what people expected I should do versus what I really not only want to do, but also like um, how I want to challenge myself in different ways. So for me, like the 200 miler, as crazy it is as crazy as it is to say, the 200 miler became my comfort zone. Going farther became my comfort zone, which is a crazy outlandish thing to say. I'm just going to start with that. But for me, when I started my off season and got into my new season, I was so focused on speed because to me, speed was getting out of my comfort zone. And this year, my goals are entirely focused around two 100-mile races where I'm focused on performance and speed. And so for me, like going farther actually became my comfort zone. And I really like what the point that you made, Jason, about like failure being like your comfort zone. Failure being about escaping the comfort zone, because we've talked about this many times, and I want to turn this over to you, Jenna. But sometimes it's not really the fear of failure. Sometimes I think it's the fear of success.
Yeah,
Uh, and so I
possible.
actually want to turn this back over to you, Jenna, and ask you that, like, uh, if we use this term of like comfort zones, do you think that sometimes as your business grows, as who you are as an individual grows, do you think that it is a fear of success and knowing that that success will mean coming out of your comfort zone even more?
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I do fear of success in a sense. And I want to pause and back up for just a second because before I lose my thought. I thought it was interesting how you said speed and a 200 miler are like in the same sentence.
They exist.
I just had to kind of, anyway. But yeah, I think 2025, I'm extremely excited and hopeful for what it brings. And I personally have grown a lot, or I feel like I've grown a lot in the past 1, 2 years. So I think the more you're on that trajectory, it seems to get like exponential. I don't know if it's confidence, if it's comfort zone, if it is your risk tolerance, or all of the above. So super excited. I don't know if
Well,
that
no, it does answer the
resonates with
question.
you.
It does answer the question, and I think we can continue to talk about success and failure with you with regards to what's coming up in 5 days at the Houston Marathon. Not necessarily about the end result, but about training and practicing for the end result. So
Right, the
you've gone,
process.
yeah, you've gone through fall and what amounts to winter, the beginning of winter for the most part. And now in 5 days, the weather is going to be slightly different than what you went through in training in October and November. So to set yourself up for success for the Houston Marathon from a nutrition hydration standpoint, like what were you doing back in October, November? Were you practicing what you thought the conditions would be like in the middle of January, or were you practicing your nutrition based on what was happening in real time back in October, November in the fall?
No, for me, I was practicing in real time. Because in Texas, for one, you never know if winter's actually going to come. And in this case, honestly, like last season, last race, I had probably every combination, whether other than snow, any weather combination you could possibly imagine. And I remember my 17 miler was freezing rain, and I went and out and race day could be like this. Um, but no, a few months ago, or as I was going through the process, I was definitely practicing in real time because that's what I physiologically needed in that moment. But with that being said, I also have been doing it long enough to know how to toggle my hydration and my nutrition. So, maybe if I had less experience, I could have possibly been practicing what I predicted to happen. But that's, like I said, I practice in real time. So,
It would seem to be like a double-edged sword, right? So if you were to practice for the conditions you expect to have happen, you might be putting yourself, you might be taking a risk in what's happening today.
Big.
So
Mhm.
let's give an example. So there's a spring race in April and it's January. If you're trying to take in a boatload of calories and liquid,
Mhm.
in January when you're probably not needing as many because the weather isn't as hot or as humid, depending on where you are in the country, couldn't that put you at risk of having something go sideways in your training and have a setback?
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, too, though, Jason, when it's cold, people think we're not sweating or needing fluid. We are still sweating. We still have fluid to replace. You may not notice the sweat as much, right? Because of the clothing that you're wearing, it's evaporating, and so you don't feel it the same way, which can be kind of deceptive. Also, we're requiring fluid to, moisten our eyes and our nose and our mouth. Like our body is requiring fluid. So calorie wise, I mean, if you're shivering and you're cold, you're actually burning more calories in that process. So again, just practicing in real time. Yeah, you do have to predict, or maybe think forward, right? Be thinking about what could potentially come. Be thinking about your game plan for different scenarios, and that's where that flexibility should be built in. Usually, when I'm running, I think about how I think the perception of a fueling plan and a hydration plan is very rigid because it's dialed in. But if you're working with somebody who is experienced enough, your plan should have some built in flexibility, so that you could adapt based on all kinds of things. It could just simply be that you're more thirsty that day. For females, what menstrual cycle are we in? So yeah, it's important to build in that flexibility too.
This is a moment where we need a good producer. That's not either one of us, because I do recall reading the amount of calories you burn by shivering and chattering your teeth and being astounded by it. So if we had a really good producer on the show, we would be able to find that answer and bring it up via
Yeah,
Google right
real
now.
fast. Well,
Definitely.
I'm sure Google's listening, so it'll pop up on our computer as soon as we log off.
Okay.
We'll get ads for blankets before we
Uh-huh.
know it.
I do take one of those emergency blankets. It's like foil, like I take one of those before the race, and then I have one in my gear bag for after. Or I'll take a spare, because what if somebody's there shivering beforehand? I know in Houston it well, I've done it in all different ways. We've had heat advisories in January. 2 years ago, there's a heat advisory. Last year it was pretty cold. It was actually perfect, but it's cold, before it starts. I don't want my mic. Sorry. Um. Anyway, like if you see somebody there shivering and freezing, I want to be able to give them one too.
I do have a follow up for you on that, and it's a general training question. But since we could share a screen here, I can actually bring it up. I don't know how true this is because it's from a .com website, but 400 calories an hour.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
That
Well, and
is
you think about what you're replacing. I think a lot of people, when I think about like what are you actually burning, and then we're asking you to replace whatever your fueling plan is, and it's usually not full replacement. And people are still scared to fuel. I just think that's kind of interesting. So,
It definitely is, and that actually leads me to a question I have for you. Now, you've been in this space for 15 years. There's always been an
mhm,
intersection of athletics and nutrition for you.
mhm.
It's a question I have for every registered like dietitian and nutrition expert, but I think this is the first time I'm actually asking this question. But do you find that there is a separation in your mind sometimes between like how you work with your clients and like kind of like how you're training? Because you have the expertise, you have the data and you have the metrics, but do you ever have those days where you're catching yourself thinking like, I don't need as much water because it's cold, and struggling with that perception yourself?
Yeah, that is a really great question. And one of the parts of that is that the difference is I'm not there with them in real time, so it can be challenging to help them like navigate those in situation moments, right? So I can kind of toggle up and down, and I've learned pretty well how to do and when to kind of employ that. So, if I kind of want to under fuel or over fuel, depending on what I'm trying to achieve that day, there are things driving that, and it's going to depend on the season. It's going to depend, now, well, a couple of things. I pay attention to, and I don't think this is outside of okay, but like you guys are males, I'm not. So I also pay attention to like my menstrual cycle and how I feel. I'm actually really excited for this year because I'm actually going to try to carb load. I'm going to be on a better end of a cycle where I can potentially be more effective in using my carbs. So we'll see how that goes. And then the other thing is I have been wearing a glucose biosensor. And I'm so curious to see what it's going to read on race day.
Lori has been wearing one for 2 or 3 weeks now, and it is fascinating.
It is fascinating.
It is an experiment of n equals 1, right?
Yes.
But it's incredible the feedback and the data that she's getting when we go for a run and she's drinking water only while on the run, 30, 45 minutes, to see a spike in the sugar level, right? And it's literally your liver working to feed you the energy that you need. It is fascinating to see. So it'll be cool for you to see the monitor's readout at the end of the marathon to give you an idea of what happened, and then try to piece together, oh, I took a gel at this moment, or I drank at this moment.
Well, and of course, so I finally paid for the subscription on Chronometer. I rarely log food, but what I use it for really is to kind of figure out my macros for certain things. I'm like, okay, this is the combo I need. But so every now and then I'll punch in my meal, but the glucose readings automatically sync into there. So it's just super cool. It's really, really cool.
I mean, it is for me super cool because I can see how I'm adjusting my eating with regards to knowing, if I eat this handful of nerd clusters in 20 or 30 minutes, I'm going to come down from that sugar high, and I can feel it because I'm more aware of it now because she's more aware of when she's eating something, right? It is, look, I don't know
it's real. It's real.
I don't know the cost of this thing. I have no idea. But if you have the opportunity to get one of these glucose monitors and you're really interested in experimenting n equals 1, I highly recommend doing it because I've been blown away by this for the last 3 weeks.
So for my edification and the edification of people who are listening to this, is it in my head, I'm envisioning this monitor that literally shows a spike of your sugar levels. Is this data real time? Is it delayed? What is it like?
So the one I have, the results log in every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, if I was diabetic, I'm not diabetic. I'll say that. If I was diabetic, I'm assuming, and I should probably know this, but I don't. Their readings come in much sooner, but it'll tell you the trend. So, every 15 minutes it'll come in and it'll say steady, or mine trend, slowly rising, spiking, and then if it spikes, it'll say what happened at this time, and you can put stress, physical activity, meal, other. So mine's every 15 minutes. What about yours, Jason?
Yeah, so the one Lori uses is also about every 15 minutes. I think some 15 to 20 at least, somewhere in that vicinity. So it is quasi real time in a sense, right? The blood has to take time to be addressed, and so you see that. But honestly, it is really cool to see from an n equals 1 standpoint what that looks like, and then you can address it based on who you are, as opposed to generic dietary guidelines, right?
And I will say, the things I tell people, like the way I build meal plans, is always with blood sugar control built in. And I'm like, oh, it's so great to see that objective number, that like the strategy I tell people, I'm like, it really works. And it's really cool. So I was happy. Now, granted, yes, that's just my response. And I would always say, like, my response, usually I say, like, well, my response to a banana is not the same as your response. And
Right.
it depends on how ripe the banana is, how big
Right.
was the banana, you know, like all kinds of things. And so, but yeah, I was
And
surprised on blueberries for me, actually. I was disappointed. But I
Uh,
just reversed and like, you gotta have your protein first, Jenna.
Before we go to the next question, we have a comment from the audience on Instagram from Carrie at Join the Good Fight. She writes, I find that I struggle with finding my balance of carbs due to my season of life and perimenopause. And I don't know, Jenna, if you have some generic ideas, concepts, tips on what that looks like for helping her out as she goes through this process.
Yeah, definitely. So carbs, this is my approach that I tell all of the athletes and clients that I work with, and my kids even. Anywhere, everywhere you go, there's going to be carbs. There's never a shortage, and I'm not dissing carbs whatsoever. I love carbs. We need carbs as endurance athletes, okay? But what I mean is, you will have access to carbs anywhere you go. So I find it better or most effective to always have your protein planned. So, hey, I'm going to go out the door. What protein am I taking with me? Because I know I'm going to have access to carbs. So, if you're trying to balance your carbs, especially as we're kind of all approaching perimenopause together, yeah, have that protein ready. And if you have your carbs with you, fantastic. But you can match your protein and carbs, like, say, if you need blood sugar control, if that's what you're referring to. If I have 20 grams of protein, we want about 20 to 30 grams of carbs, right? If I have 30 grams of protein, 30 to 45 grams of carbs. So we wouldn't want like 5 grams of protein and 45 grams of carbs, unless we're fueling, not balancing our blood sugar. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
that
makes
makes
total
sense.
sense.
Before you move on to the next question, Jason, I would, since we were on the topic of blood sugar and glucose monitors, I think that you should be wearing that and the heart rate monitor so we can check your variability in blood sugar when I bring up the pineapple on pizza question.
We'll
I
definitely.
love it.
Well, Jenna's going to get asked this question because she's just recently been to New York City. So we're going to have a lot of food questions at the end about being in
Yes.
New York.
It was so much fun.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, because since we're such investigative journalists here at Run Try Bike, I recently saw that you were on the 3 on KBTX and you discussed SMART goals. And when it comes to business, we use SMART goals all the time. When I teach marketing to the college students I teach marketing to, we talk about SMART goals. I'd like for you to elaborate on SMART goals and how endurance athletes can incorporate that concept into their training and racing.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for like noticing that TV segments or local TV station. They are so much fun. Just like you guys. It's so much fun. So anyway, SMART goals are really great and effective because you can actually measure progress, and we're defining a specific behavior or goal that we're trying to achieve, instead of like, I would like to run a marathon someday. Great, right? So what are we going to do to get there? Right? So usually there's small steps. So I misspoke on that segment. I don't know why. I kept saying, I don't know if you caught it, Jason, if you listened to the whole thing or not, but SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant. I said realistic, relevant, and time bound.
Yep.
So, we wouldn't want to create a goal around something that didn't matter to you, that wasn't relevant to you. We wouldn't want to create a goal that was absolutely not an option, right? Like, I want to run a 5-minute pace, at the marathon on Sunday. Not going to happen. Okay. So it's not realistic. It's not achievable for me. So setting something specific. The example I used on the TV segment was just a random example that I kind of made up on the fly. I believe it was something along, I'm going to walk 30 minutes after lunch, 5 days a week for 3 months so that I can lose, and I just said like 3 or 4 pounds of body fat. Right. And honestly, I built that around the concept of blood sugar regulation, actually, because it's just been really on my mind. And if you walk after a meal, it can help regulate your blood sugar. So, yeah, I think they're highly effective for just creating manageable goals that you can measure. And measuring progress gives you a boost. And I mean, then you want to continue. So,
How do you, as a sports dietitian, work with athletes in this regard for SMART goals? So they come to you and they say, I'm planning on running, you know, a marathon. My goal is 4.5 hours, 5 hours, whatever it is, and it's in 6 months. I
mhm.
need your help with the nutrition side of it all. Like, how do you work together with them on that
Mhm.
part of it now that you know what the end goal is, time frame, timeliness, and realistic, and everything else like that?
Yeah, of course, that's going to be individualized to that specific person because we're all fighting different battles. I don't know, with the same but different, I think. But yeah, that's more for my, I'm going to say high level, meaning highly invested people who are doing a coaching program with me. And so I kind of work backwards from this is where we want to be, here are the steps that we need to take, and whether they're small or big. Obviously, when we're working with SMART goals, we're going to try to make them into small steps. So it's knowing that other person and knowing their strengths and weaknesses, knowing what areas they could expand on, for their overall goal. So yeah, of course, it may be a race goal, but as a sports dietitian, at least the way I practice is I'm always keeping your whole health, overall health in mind. So I'm also looking through the lens of that as well. So individualized.
So there is a physical, like we've talked about the physical aspect of training and all the variables around it.
Mhm.
I'm curious about the mental aspect of everything. Like, for example, like certain days, obviously, like there are, I'm speaking for me personally, like sometimes stress can impact the way you're like eating. It's
Mhm.
not always going to be perfect. Jason and I have been very vocal about eating disorders that we both
Mhm.
experience. And so I'm always curious as to how you, as a sports dietitian, work with the mental side of all of that. Because, as you said, we are individualized, we have different lives, but that's not only the races we're doing and our
Yeah.
profiles and all of that, it's also maybe our work schedules or
Yeah.
maybe what we can afford, and just a variety of different factors in all the facets of life. So I'm curious as to how you handle those factors. And, to add on to that question as well, like kind of ebbing and flowing, or not ebbing and flowing, kind of cutting through all the trends on social media, because
Yeah.
don't know if you've seen with ultra running, there was kind of a low carb movement. And now,
Mhm.
after what happened with David Roach, who is kind of a big runner in the
Mhm.
space, winning the Leadville 100, there's been kind of a shift to the high carb approach.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious as to how you handle the mental side of your
Mhm.
clients and how you deal, or rather cut through those trends.
Yeah. A lot to unpack there. The mental side, I'm like, okay, hold on to everything you just said. Mental,
Long-winded
right?
question.
It
It was
was.
coming out. It
We're
was coming
endurance
out, and
athletes,
it was
though.
building. I was talking.
Yeah, yeah. So the mental side first. So first and foremost, not that it's like, oh, well, this is what I do. It's never like that. But what I do bring to the table is perspective, right? Like, I don't know about you. I'm not paid to train. I have a life outside of training, and the people that I work with do too. We have jobs, we have families, we have friends. Hopefully, we have some kind of social life, unless you have a job, family, and friends. No, I'm just kidding. um, but yeah, so just having that perspective, I think, is essential to begin with. And then I'm not trying to like repeat this and at all. And we didn't even intend to talk about blood sugar, but this is just like coming out a lot. But in terms of mental, like I was, let's see, my segment what today on TV was going to be about that, and then we changed it. But your blood sugar control and your it affects your mentality. It affects your brain and your mindset. So when I'm coming in and I'm getting people balanced and meeting their nutrition needs, daily nutrition needs, getting their hydration in check, and then of course their fueling. So when we're balanced in that regard and meeting our needs, that impacts your mindset and the mental side of things. So the nutrition goes hand in hand with that mental side of things. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm never going to pretend or act like I'm a psychologist or a coach. But I do know that your nutrition and your hydration directly impact your mental capacity and your mindset. So
Have you
let's see. Oh yeah.
I was going to ask, like, because it does come into the mental side of it a little bit too, with monitoring, your intake. Like, people can become very obsessive over it, to the point where then it becomes somewhat detrimental. How do you work with a client if you see that starting to happen, where they become so obsessed with this idea that I can only eat 10 blueberries because it's 30 calories, and I can't eat 31 calories, or I can't eat 29 calories, whatever, to the point where it does start to become detrimental? Like, how do you work with them from that perspective? Because that is also a mental piece of it all.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really great point. And so typically, before I even meet with somebody, right, they're filling out their intake forms, or maybe we had a like introductory call, or even just an email exchange, whatever kind of communication we had prior to. I'm pretty good at picking up on what kind of potential red flags there may be. I'm able to kind of pick up on it through language they may use, or obviously how they're filling out their forms. So going into that consultation, typically I'm going to kind of have an idea of what kind of language I need to use in that consultation. And that's just simply one, because I've been there. I was not diagnosed with an eating disorder, but looking in the rear view mirror, I certainly had tendencies and could have very much been that. And I usually say I consider myself one of the lucky few who, I came out on the other side before it was a big thing. But anyway, that being said, that experience really helps me in what I do. So I never require people to log their food. If I know they have a history, or I predict they're going to have a tendency, then I make sure that I reinforce that logging your food is not required. Sometimes it's a short term, like, I'll say, okay, and maybe we work out some macros for specific meals, so that, especially if you're somebody who kind of has a go to, I eat the same breakfast every day because the way my morning is, or something like that, then it makes it easy. Like, let's dial in those macros a couple times, and then you don't have to measure that again. Yeah. So there's that. And then if I see those behaviors kind of trending as we're working together, I'm very, quick to remind them, hey, this is not something that we have to do long term. Shouldn't feel like it's never required. And there's a lot of dialing in you can do without logging food. So
Yeah, as you were talking about your intake form, I immediately thought of the eye doctor, and how oftentimes you see people that are like, I'm going to memorize the eye chart before they ask me the questions. And I'm like, what's the point of going to the eye doctor to
right.
not get the prescription that you're going to need to help you? And so
Yeah.
for you being able to cut through the nonsense, the bullshit
Mm-hmm.
on an intake form, because I know that there are going to be people out there who might be embarrassed about putting something
Yeah.
on a piece of
Mm-hmm.
paper, right? But the reality, for those of you in the audience, if you're seeking help, the only way you can get the help that you actually need is by being honest with the person you're getting help from,
Absolutely.
right? So telling Jena, that you don't eat chocolate cake, even though you eat chocolate
Mm-hmm.
cake twice a week, isn't going to help you
Yeah.
in, developing a personalized nutrition plan for yourself. So make sure
Absolutely.
you just give her the open, honest answers.
For sure. And like I said, I can pick up on it. And I will not, if they do not disclose it, I'm not going to say, oh, well, I think,
Right.
I don't ever do anything. I just gently kind of modify our conversation. And again, I can deliver the same message with different language, right? We can get to the same place on a different route.
Right.
So, yeah, I enjoy that though, because I mean, these are humans. That's part of the process.
100%.
Otherwise, I would just have like a little script that I read and.
Just go to ChatGPT and type in,
Oh
provide
yeah,
me with a nutrition plan.
exactly. I haven't been on that. I haven't
It's
used
a
that.
wonderful tool. It's a wonderful
Okay.
tool if used properly.
Okay.
One of the things that I've learned about myself in using ChatGPT is I've become a better interviewer because of
Okay.
how to ask questions. Like when you ask
Right.
ChatGPT, is the sky blue? It's going to say yes, right? But the real question you're trying to ask is, why is the sky blue? Not is the sky blue?
Right.
And so it has taught me how to become a better interviewer because of the question I'm asking is going to be more defined and
Yeah.
better than
Hmm.
what it would be if I wasn't becoming my own AI,
Yeah.
service for that matter.
Right. Well, I think what you're saying is like you're asking more intentionally, right?
100%.
We're not, it's like a SMART goal. We're not being
Yep.
ambiguous about what we're asking. We're being intentional about this is actually, or maybe talking like a woman. This is what I'm saying, but this is actually what I mean.
And here's the thing, right? You get better answers, you get better
Hmm.
conversations, you get more vulnerable answers, which builds trust. And then before you know it, you have connection. Whereas if you
Yeah.
don't do that stuff, it's all surface level. And honestly, at this point in my life, I turned 51 a month ago. Like I don't need any surface level stuff
Yeah.
anymore. Like I want to get into the
Over it.
weeds. I want to be in depth and answer questions.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things that I noticed on your posts on Instagram recently as well was one of your goals, I think, or maybe it was a tip, is to get in 60 to 75 grams of carbs while running the Houston Marathon. Now,
Hmm.
for some people that'll be easy. For some people that'll be
Yeah.
hard. I will say this: when I first started in endurance sports, I took a sweat test and I found out that I needed to take in approximately 35 ounces of water because or liquid
Oh,
because
you're a
I'm
heavy
such a heavy
sweater.
sweater.
Yeah.
And the idea, I was like, I got to
How
drink
do you
two.
carry that? There's
Yeah.
just
I
so
was like,
much. Yeah.
and how am I going to drink 2.5 bottles an hour? And the
Right.
reality was I've trained myself. I practiced. It didn't happen
Yep.
overnight. I
Yep.
sat on the bike and I literally would, pedal and try to consume
Yep.
2.5 bottles an hour, and it worked out. So, advice for those who are looking to increase their carb intake to get to, this range that you've
Hmm.
provided, 60 to 75. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's a little too late for the Houston Marathon being in 5 days, but maybe
Yeah.
for their next event, any ideas on how they can gradually increase that carb intake so that they're comfortable with it when they get ready to race at their next event?
For sure. And I will say, some people may, before we had this, when we were chatting before this started, I could push the envelope and go higher than, 75 grams, 60 to 75 grams of carbs. That's where my comfort level is. And I'm a sports dietitian. Okay. And it's been a process. It's been hard for me, even doing what I do, kind of moving the needle there. But the answer is sometimes you have to be creative with what kind of products you're using. So, for example, if you have a carb product like a gel, if that's what you're using, and it has 18 or 19 grams of carbs, maybe it's switching. One thing is to switch to one that has 25, 27, 29 grams of carbs. Okay. Yes, there are products. So that would move the needle a little bit in the right direction, especially if you're doing more than one of those an hour. So we can add up carbs pretty quickly. If you are tinkering with your hydration concentration, that is potentially another way that you could increase your carbs, and you're not increasing volume, which is really nice, right? So if you know how much fluid you need, then we can add more or less depending on what you're trying to do and concentrate those carbs. But depending on what that product is, we also need to see how concentrated, how much we're concentrating the electrolytes based on your needs as well. Um, there are gel products that are bigger and have, all in one, right? They may be low sodium, and we're using a rehydration product for that, for our sodium. But there are gels that have 60, 75, 90 grams of carbs in one. Now, it depends on individual preference. I don't like how big they are personally. And the other thing too is I recommend I'm going to use I think a fancy word here, but I like the word titrate. So I like to or pulse, like however you want to say that. You don't want to take in 90 grams of carbs all in one at one time. So you're basically going to be nursing that gel. So you have to be okay with carrying it, and kind of sipping on it and nursing on it over the hour. You could close it, put it back wherever you plan to store it, but that's going to be totally up to you if that's the approach you want to take. You would know then if you were, say, I had a pouch of 90 grams of carbs. The nice part about that, if it was resealable, not all of them are. Hey, when I'm done with this, I know I met my carb goal, right? So that's really nice for counting and measuring. But yeah, I think sometimes just sneaking in little things, whether, like I said, let's swap that product for something that's just slightly more concentrated. Maybe we could have a little pouch of chews. And so it's like that plus one or two chews if you don't mind chewing while you're running. I don't love chewing while I'm running. I like my liquid product, even though I'm not really enjoying them by the end of it. So
that's, for me, that's one of the things that leads me to varying my intake, is the overload of a particular flavor. So I use a lot of liquid nutrition, Tailwind or Scratch, but then I'm also eating food such as the Seven Summit Snacks Bar or Cliff Blocks energy gels, or even, look, at an ultra 100 miles, 200 miles, I'm eating a Snickers bar along the way.
Absolutely.
Just varying flavors, so that I don't get so tired of it that I'm like, I just don't want to eat this anymore, because you're still moving. You still have to be fueling.
Yep, for sure. You do have to your point earlier when we were talking about like looking forward, kind of predicting the weather, or at least thinking about what could potentially be ahead for an ultra distance and for any distance, right? But especially for an ultra, you really have to anticipate and know yourself. Hey, I know that I get really bored with monotony, right? So I know that about myself. We need to make plans with that expectation. So definitely for the ultra distance, I think that it can be mind over matter for a marathon distance. I almost said a shorter distance, and that's not nice because, it becomes relative.
It's all
I'm
relative.
sure 26.2 miles is very short for you guys, but for a lot of people, that's a really far distance.
It's far.
It is.
Whether I've run 100 miles or not, 26.2 miles is far. Period. End of story.
Yeah.
So much to the point where I've sworn them off. Like, I would prefer to run 100 miles because I can take my time. I can hike. I can sit down in a chair and eat and do whatever I need to do versus running the marathon. I want to ask you this question because I know over my course of 17, 18 years of being involved in these sports, my nutritional intake has changed quite a bit. You've been doing this for less time than I have. Compare yourself to when you first started in these sports to today. Have you seen a change in the number of calories you're taking in and how you're taking them in?
Yes, because when I started out, I knew absolutely nothing about nutrition or anything of the
Mhm.
sort. I didn't know anything about shoes or anything about running in general when I started in 2018. And then when 2020 came along and I started getting into the realm of ultras, I honestly like, and I've been very vocal about this. I went on the journey of like both the combination of like trying to do as many miles as the quote unquote the pros instead of focusing on time on feet and thinking that I was one of those guys who did fasted runs and I made every mistake in the book. And it took me a long time to overcome that mentality. And in 2023, throughout the entire from 2023 through the 2024 season, I knew I needed outside help. And this is my message to everybody. I did bring on
Mhm.
Kim Crapeshaw, shout out to MRC Nutrition. I did bring on a registered dietitian because I knew I needed. It's like having a counsel in the war, right? Like like I have my therapist, I have like registered dietitian, I had my coach. It's like being able to lean back on your counsel and being able to ask those questions that you otherwise would have to dig for answers yourself, not knowing if they were right.
Mhm. Mhm.
Changed my mentality, and now I'm happy to say and would encourage everybody the same that I'm at least having like even on 30-minute runs, I'm bringing water. I'm at least bringing electrolytes on every single run, and I am anything over the hour. Like there is a grams of carbs number behind everything. I'm fueling everything, so it's been a journey.
Yeah, I carry water on a 30-minute run too. Like I've been
I do
dehydrated and
too.
it's an awful feeling.
It's so
I do
bad.
too. I'm just thinking, I mean, I think for some athletes being, you know, tolerant to a certain degree, well, we're all tolerant to a certain degree of some level of dehydration. But I mean, for the most part, those of us everyday athletes, I just don't really see any benefit in not hydrating. I definitely hydrate every run with water and a rehydration product. I tend to put my carbs into my fuel, and then I have a little bit of carbs in my liquid, but it's mostly it's light carbs.
Yeah.
And then I do that's
And I think the lesson here for listeners and viewers is that you literally are, like we said earlier, an experiment of n equals one. Do what's right for you. If what you've been doing hasn't been working, change it up, get in touch with Jena and get a personalized nutrition plan so that you can figure out how to perform your best without worrying about, sorry to Susie and Savannah, what Susie and Savannah on Instagram thinks, right? Like, get the personalized information that you need that's going to help you perform better because that's what you're here for. That's what you've studied. That's what your professional is and expertise is to help folks with exactly
exactly.
that. Am I
That
not
is
right?
absolutely right. And I work for or I help with daily nutrition, right? We exist outside of training. What we eat outside of training, I mean, dare I say, it's more important than what we're doing during training. But I mean, they we need both ideally. But yeah, we do. I work on daily nutrition, race nutrition, supplements, and all of that. So it's yeah, it all comes together. I just love it. So
Yeah. And I have to say, like, I cannot stress enough, like, if you're really setting performance-based goals or if you really feel
mhm.
like you need that help, like, go talk to a registered dietitian. It makes a big difference. It made a big difference for me with my mental health of not having to worry about those things and just being able to like do the intake, like talk about what I'm eating, talk about what my goals are, what my races are that I want to build towards performance. And it is just, it's like coaching, but for food and like
Yeah,
just having that counsel behind you makes a huge difference. So this is my
absolutely.
message to everybody that to go give it a shot.
So before we jump into our rapid fire food questions for Jena. Jena, let the people know where they can find you and contact you if they're interested in bringing you on to help them with their nutrition and hydration needs for their next endurance sports endeavor.
Awesome. Yeah. So my website is victorum.com. My business is Victorum Performance Nutrition, but the website is victorum.com. And then on Facebook and Instagram, I'm at Victorum Nutrition. And so you should be able to find me there somewhere. And then if you Google it, right? If you Google my name, except I only have one in, Jena Brown, my website will pop up. So I appreciate that.
This show will also be on our YouTube channel and our website, as well as on the podcast format wherever you get your podcasts. So Jena, let's jump into our rapid fire food questions. This is your second time being on the show, so we can't ask the old questions, but you were just in New York City. And so my first question to you is, the best thing you ate while you were there was?
Oh no. Okay. I'm gonna say my favorite meal was in Pershing Square. We had breakfast there. Is that how you say it? Pershing Square?
Pershing
Yes.
Square, yep.
And there's a little diner there, and we had breakfast. I had a salad with an omelet that morning, and coffee, of course.
Yeah,
Lots of
course.
coffee.
We're not monsters here.
Oh man, we had so much great food.
It is. It's a great place to get food all across various spectrums in cuisines in New York City. You can get whatever you want at any time of the day, really. While you were there, did you have pizza?
I did not the past 2 times I was there, honestly, because I was like, I don't know who to believe. So the way we based our meal like where we ate, I just asked locals, hey, where do you eat? And
Yep.
so then we just went and found their restaurant. So yes, we had pizza. It was near Rockefeller Center. May have been called Little Italy. But yeah, it was good. It was really good. I have a picture of it. Took a picture of all my food.
You're gonna have to share it with us so that we
Yeah.
can see it. So earlier today, or actually yesterday, I had a poppy seed bagel and I was frustrated because all the poppy seeds fell everywhere. I was so angry. The poppy seed bagel is now ranked like 1,000 when it comes to bagels. Top 3 bagels for you would be?
So I had a multi-grain bagel while I was there. I love how they're kettle boiled. Is that what they're called? Kettle boiled? Okay,
Yes.
so that's what gives the nice texture on the outside. I didn't know that.
It's in the water. It's in the water.
Yes, it's like making pretzels. If you've ever made a homemade pretzel, you dip it in the water. Okay,
Yep.
so I didn't know that. But yeah, I had a whole grain bagel, and I only had one bagel while I was there. But my other favorites,
Oh.
yeah, because there weren't enough meals to like, we were trying to like spread it out. So that bagel had avocado, egg, cheese, I believe, and but my other favorites would be cinnamon raisin, and gosh, I don't know. I'm kind of a cinnamon raisin and then multigrain, honestly. But there were too many.
Do you have
It was overwhelming how many bagels were on that menu.
Welcome to
Yeah.
New York. Do you have a Mount Rushmore of bagel flavors?
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, it would be like I really like onion bagels is one that's good for. I really like that flavor. I really like it's like a jalapeno cheddar bagel that I really like. That's like
This guy with his jalapenos on
See, I
everything.
didn't get to
I love my
experiment
spice.
with any of that. Golly, I missed out.
Trader Joe's has a seasonal pumpkin spice bagel that is just phenomenal.
So for me, the pantheon starts with pumpernickel, and then marble rye, and then finally, coming in third place is going to be the plain bagel.
Okay.
Just super simple. Keep it easy.
Man, I'm missing out. I am. I'm gonna go back. I would go back tomorrow if I could,
You-
but I will get a different
You
bagel
definitely have.
next time I'm there.
couple of weeks ago, I put up a Food Fight Friday that involved 9 sandwiches. I saw this post and it was like, here are the top 9. Here are 9 sandwiches. What are your top 3? So I want to get your thoughts on what are the top 3 out of these 9 sandwiches and whether or not maybe they missed one and you have a different one. So your choices are the gyro, the cubano, the meatball sub, chicken parm, grilled cheese, Philly cheesesteak, French dip, pulled pork, and the banh mi. Which are your top 3 out of those 9?
Euro, I say it a little bit different. Philly cheesesteak, and there was one at the end that you said.
The banh mi?
No, what was before that one? Pulled pork. I actually like pulled pork. Yeah.
Pulled pork.
So those are my 3.
Now, with your pulled pork, is it sloppy, wet with sauce all over it?
Yes, but not, like I'm really weird about everything. Everything is like sugary. So I like the vinegar-based barbecue sauce.
Yes.
And then coleslaw. Vinegar-based coleslaw.
You gotta have
not
coleslaw
the mayonnaise-y one. I love mayonnaise, but I like the vinegar coleslaw.
What are your top 3 out of that list?
What are my top 3 out of that list? I forgot the top 3 already.
All of them. Give me all of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So here are some cake choices now. We discussed cake the last time you were here, but here are some plain or some cake choices. Top 5 are plain chocolate cake, German chocolate cake, black forest cake, and red velvet. So they all have chocolate in them. Which one is going to take the top spot for you? Which one you're like, I'm going to eat that one before all others?
It's going to have to be German chocolate.
Because?
I didn't like the others.
German chocolate wins by default. Do you even like German chocolate, or you just have to feel like you have to answer the question?
My homemade one that I make is amazing. Yeah. So if it's like legit cake, yeah, it is good.
What would be non-legit cake?
Well, not homemade. Like I don't eat store-bought dessert because I make really good dessert. So I know what good cake and good cookies and whatever tastes like. So yeah, a homemade German chocolate cake. And last time we talked about like crunchy and all that, so I like the crunchy. I put pecans in it and shaved coconut, shredded coconut, so it's kind of has that little crunch.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing to bake then?
Ooh.
At home?
Gosh, I'm very well known for my M&M cookies, and I love my carrot cake recipe. Yeah. And then my German chocolate cake is really good. So.
Does your carrot cake have raisins in it?
Mm-mm. I don't like
warm
raisins. They get kind of like they expand. I don't like it. No raisins.
I'm 51 years old, like I mentioned earlier, and but I've been this old since I was like 12 because I've always loved raisins. Like put raisins in my carrot cake, put raisins in my oatmeal cookie, give me Raisin Bran as my favorite cereal. Like I would love raisins.
Oh my gosh. I did go through a craisin phase.
Very good.
No, I don't really do that. But I found some dried bananas lately, and I got a dehydrator for Christmas that I need to tinker with.
So what's the one food that you've kind of been turning towards these days, especially as you go through taper and the races 5 days away? Is there something that has become like the comfort food for you lately?
This week is actually pretty stressful. I'm commuting every day for this TV thing. And so it's actually putting a kink in my fueling. And so I'm thinking, okay, I've got to pull it together. Even as a dietitian, man, I am a real human being and I don't have everything ready all the time. If I was just at home, it'd be different, but just being on the road and then coming back and having to pick up kids from school and all of this. But I always kind of lean heavily on baked potatoes. Yeah. Ooh. And I don't know if my body is just like, hey, you need some extra potassium. But I love baked potatoes. So I'll be taking that with me for the night before, and I always take my food for the night before. I don't go out to eat. Just stay the same. So
I love it. Well, Jena, thank you so much for joining us again. For those of you who are watching live or who listen to it on the podcast, check out our website, runtrymag.com. Search for Jena Brown. Previous articles will come up, as well as her previous appearance on our Fireside chat. Also, be sure to check out her website, victorem.com, which is victorem.com. Get in touch with her to get your nutrition and hydration for your next endurance sports event squared away. Jena, thank you so much. Have a great evening, and we'll talk to you
all
soon.
right, you too.